What if I told you that Persia never truly disappeared? It simply changed its name. Why would a country with thousands of years of history decide to erase its identity before the world in the middle of the 20th century? Today, we will travel through glorious empires, brutal invasions, and decisions that rewrote the memory of an entire people. This is not just the story of a country. It is the story of how power, religion, and public image can alter the destiny of an entire civilization. So sit back, because what you're about to discover goes far beyond a simple name change. Subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling us which other forgotten civilizations you would like to explore. Imagine a land surrounded by towering mountains, scorching deserts, and ancient trade routes where more than merchandise flowed. Identity, power, and legacy traveled along them as well. That land is the Iranian Plateau, a strategic region that has been for millennia the cradle of civilizations. But how did it all begin? And who were the true architects of what we now know as Iran? To understand that, we must travel back to the second millennium before Christ, when the Indo-Iranian peoples arrived. They were nomads who spoke Indo-European languages, distant relatives of those who centuries later would speak Latin, Greek, or even Portuguese and Spanish. Their language had nothing in common with Arabic, which many today mistakenly associate with Iran. No, in Old Persian, Mada meant mother and Peda father, echoes that still resonate as mater and pater in Latin. They were not just sounds, they were the roots of a distinct, deep, and ancient culture. Among those peoples, two stood out, the Medes and the Persians. The Medes settled in the northwest of what is now Iran. They were powerful, organized, and quickly established themselves as the dominant force. The Persians, on the other hand, settled farther south in a region called Pars, from which the name Persia originates. It was fertile and strategically located, but not especially powerful at first. No one could have imagined that this people would be the ones to forever change the course of history. At that time, Persian was merely a limited geographic designation. It did not represent the entire region, much less an entire civilization. The true center of power was the Medes. They founded the first major empire in that part of the world, long before the name Persia would be spoken in foreign courts or written in history books. But things were about to change. In the midst of those mountains and plains, a man would be born whose ambition would shatter the structures of the past, a leader who saw beyond divided tribes and dreamed of unprecedented unity. His name was Kurosh, or as the world would come to know him, Cyrus the Great. With him began the era of the first empire that dared to conquer not only lands, but hearts. Before Alexander, Napoleon, or Genghis Khan dreamed of conquering the world, there was a man who did it first and did it differently. While the empires of the ancient Near East imposed their rule with iron fists, destruction, and exile, Cyrus the Great built an empire on a radical idea, ruling through respect. After defeating the Medes, Cyrus did more than unify peoples. He founded the Achaemenid Empire, a political machine that instead of sowing fear, cultivated loyalty. Rather than imposing a single language or religion, he protected the temples of the conquered, respected their gods, and allowed their cultures to flourish. For the Jews exiled in Babylon, for example, he was not an invader, but a liberator. For the Babylonians, not an enemy, but a restorer chosen by Marduk. Cyrus did not proclaim himself the envoy of a Persian god. He cleverly became the chosen one of the local gods, and it worked with brutal efficiency. Under Cyrus and his successors, especially Darius I, the Persian Empire expanded from the banks of the Indus River to the shores of the Aegean Sea, from Egypt to Central Asia. In less than a century, they absorbed the great empires of the ancient world and turned them into provinces. Egypt, Babylon, names that once dominated history, now answered to Persepolis. But size was not their only achievement. This empire developed a vast road network connecting thousands of miles of territory, a messaging system as fast as lightning, and a bureaucracy that did more than control. It administered, recorded, and negotiated. It was a masterpiece of diplomacy, strategy, and pragmatism. Historian Lloyd Llewellyn-Jones, among many others, calls it without hesitation the world's first superpower. Yet the balance between cultural respect and centralized power was delicate. Like a tightrope stretched across the empire, it only took a push or a sword to break it. That push came riding from the west, led by an ambitious young man named Alexander. What was about to unfold was not merely a war. It was a clash between two worlds. In the year 334 before Christ, a relatively small but disciplined army crossed the Hellespont heading east. It was led by a young Macedonian king not yet 30 years old. His name was Alexander, but the world would know him as Alexander the Great. His goal was not simply to conquer territory, it was to avenge Greece, humiliate Persia, and perhaps, just perhaps, become a legend. And he did. In a series of decisive battles, Granicus, Issus, and finally Gaugamela, the Persian army was crushed. The Achaemenid Empire, which for generations had ruled half the world, collapsed under the assault of a young man with the ambition of a god. But the most surprising part was not his victory. It was what he did afterward. Alexander did not destroy Persia. He did not erase it from the map. He admired it, studied it, and in a way became it. He married Persian princesses, wore Eastern robes, participated in Zoroastrian rituals, and began calling himself the legitimate successor of the Achaemenid kings. He preserved the Persian bureaucracy, ruled from Persian palaces, and for many Greeks, that was unforgivable. Within his army, this Persianization unleashed a storm. Generals and soldiers raised on Hellenic ideals saw his actions as a betrayal. Had they not come to destroy Persia, to free Greece from the Eastern yoke? Now their leader seemed to have fallen under the spell of Persian luxury, splendor, and spirituality. Internal tensions grew, and some began to conspire. But Alexander had a broader vision. He understood that ruling such a vast empire was not just a matter of swords. It was a matter of symbols, legitimacy, and fusion. He wanted to create a universal civilization where East and West could coexist. Perhaps he dreamed of being more than a Macedonian king. Perhaps he wanted to be eternal. His sudden death in the year 323 before Christ, at the age of 32, left that dream unfinished. With no clear successor, his empire was divided among his generals, the so-called Diadochi. The central region of the former Persian Empire fell into the hands of the Seleucids, descendants of Seleucus, one of his commanders. But Persia, as an idea, did not disappear. It simply slept. And soon new dynasties would awaken it, claiming for themselves the legacy of the ancient kings. When Alexander died, his empire quickly shattered like a broken mirror. Yet within the scattered pieces, Persia remained alive. Under Seleucid rule, and later under the Parthians, the ancient Persian region never ceased to be coveted. Though kings changed, the cultural heart of the territory continued to beat strongly. It was only a matter of time before new Persians would reclaim their throne. Thus arose the Sassanids, a dynasty born in the very region where it had all begun, Pars. They claimed to be direct descendants of the Achaemenids and proudly restored many of their traditions. Under their rule, Zoroastrianism, the ancient Persian religion centered on the god Ahura Mazda, was reaffirmed as the state faith. Temples rose again, culture flourished, and Persia once more became an empire worthy of fear. But no power is eternal. In the 7th century, a new force was emerging from the Arabian Peninsula. It was Islam, and it did not arrive as a guest. It came as a conqueror. Within decades, Arab armies defeated the Sassanids and took control of the former Persian Empire. With them came new beliefs, a new language, and a new political order. Zoroastrianism was gradually displaced by Islam. Arabic became the administrative and religious language, and Persian began to absorb its influence, adopting words, styles, and structures. But the Persian soul did not disappear. It endured in its poetry, in its sciences, in its art, and even in the way it embraced the new without entirely abandoning the old. In the centuries that followed, the region passed through Turkish, Mongol, and other local Persian dynasties. The Buyids even came to control Baghdad, the heart of the Caliphate. Then came the Seljuks, the Mongols of Genghis Khan, Tamerlane, and various Turkmen states that fiercely fought over every inch of territory. It was a chaotic chessboard where power constantly changed hands. Yet in that whirlwind of wars and conquests, something began to solidify. A Persian identity that, though now Muslim, distinguished itself from the Arab world. That distinction would grow stronger under a new dynasty that would not only restore political unity, but leave an indelible religious mark. Amid the chaos of small dynasties and regional wars, a force emerged that would forever transform the political and religious soul of the region, the Safavid dynasty. They were not just another lineage hungry for power. They had a clear vision to unify the territory under a distinct banner, that of Shia Islam. Until then, the Islam practiced in the region had been predominantly Sunni, as in most of the Islamic world. But the Safavids decided to impose Twelver Shi'ism as the official religion. It was not a smooth transition. They enforced it through persecution, reforms, and deep social restructuring. Yet in doing so, they planted the seed of what would distinguish Iran from the rest of the Islamic world to this day. The Safavid dynasty did more than mark a religious turning point. It was also crucial in the rebirth of Persian identity, this time integrated with Islam. They promoted architecture, poetry, philosophy, medicine, and science, but under a new banner, in a renewed language, and with a worldview that blended imperial legacy with Shia spirituality. It was a new Persia with a different face. And with that new face, the term Iran began to reappear with greater strength. Derived from Arianum, the land of the Aryans, the name had deep ancient roots, but until then, it had been used more within the country than abroad. In contrast, Persia, which originally referred only to a province, Fars, was the name by which foreigners had known the country since the time of the Greeks. Thus, while the Safavids consolidated their control, and later dynasties, such as the Qajars, kept the structure of the state alive, an identity duality was taking shape. Persia for the outside world, Iran for the Iranians themselves. An ambiguity that was neither accidental nor permanent, because in the 20th century, with the arrival of a new monarch determined to modernize and westernize the country, that duality would be resolved, not through battles or treaties, but through a simple letter sent to every embassy in the world. For centuries, the world had known this ancient land as Persia. It was a name that evoked glorious empires, fine carpets, mystical poetry, and advanced science. But for many in the West, Persia also represented the exotic, the distant, the decadent, a legacy of Greek narratives that portrayed it as a civilization of excessive luxury, tyranny, and moral corruption. It was in this context, already in the 20th century, that Reza Shah Pahlavi, the Iranian monarch at the time, with strong modernization ambitions, made a decision as symbolic as it was strategic. In 1935, he sent a diplomatic circular to all foreign embassies, requesting that from that point forward, his country be called by its endogenous name, Iran. Why do it? It was not simply a matter of linguistic preference. It was an attempt to break away from the Orientalist vision that the West held of Persia, a label burdened with colonial connotations. By adopting Iran, a name that in Persian means the land of the Aryans or of the nobles, the country sought to project a new image, stronger, modern, and sovereign, a move of symbolic diplomacy. But not without controversy. Within the country, many intellectuals and citizens saw the decision as a betrayal. For them, Persia represented a glorious past. The Achaemenids, Darius, Cyrus, literature, medicine, the greatness of an empire that challenged the world. Abandoning that name felt to some like severing a legacy thousands of years old. But the decision stood. Iran would be the official name, and so it would appear in books, newspapers, and international treaties. Yet history did not stop there. In 1979, after a revolution led by Ayatollah Khomeini, the monarchy was overthrown, and the Islamic Republic of Iran was established. Relations with the West collapsed. Shi'ism became even more central, and the global perception of the country changed dramatically. Today, Iran evokes for many images of geopolitical tensions, sanctions, conflict, and fundamentalism. Meanwhile, Persia, ironically, has regained a romantic aura associated with lost grandeur, refined culture, and an almost mythical past. Two names, one land, and a constant struggle to decide how it will be remembered. Because sometimes a simple name hides a silent war between what we were, what we are, and what the world wants to see in us. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this video and are passionate about this kind of content, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss upcoming videos and can discover more fascinating stories. See you in the next video.